Hi, it's Summer. I'm really late filming this, but this is going to be my January and February wrap up. Including the books that I've read in March, I've already read 30 books this year, so I'm feeling really good about my reading goal and being able to like stay on top of it. I have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm just gonna get right into it. The first book that I read this year was Goddess by Cheryl Tan. It's a poetry collection. It says, a poet looks back on her religious past, built upon Buddhist and Christian imagery. This is her love letter to queer teenagehood. Glittering with fragments of a failed relationship, these poems piece together a tale of desire, destruction, and loss. I read this one as an e-arc through NetGalley. That's how I've been finding a lot of the poetry that I've been reading lately, is I just find arcs for things that sound interesting, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. This one unfortunately was just very middle of the road for me. I gave it 2.5 stars. I said I couldn't understand many of the poems or relate to them, which is important to me when reading a collection. I could tell that it was very personal with lots of thought and soul put into it though. This might be more enjoyed by a more seasoned poetry reader, but unfortunately it wasn't for me. I did enjoy the poems Goddess and Padma. I also enjoyed the line, intimacy is a fountain that I drink from, your chest a hollow crevice where I yield, from the poem Goddess. After that, I reread one of my favorite books, A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I'm pretty sure that this was my 5th time reading it. I listened to the graphic audiobooks for this one. I highly recommend it. I just never get sick of this world or these characters. I need an announcement for the next book in this series. Like either that or some news from Harry Styles or Taylor Swift that something new from them is coming out. Like that is what I need in my life. One of those 3 things, or all of them. I'd be very okay with that. But I also feel like with this world expanding the way that it is, it's fun to reread them because I feel like I'm trying to like catch more things each time I read them. So yeah, loved this. I love to reread books. It's one of my favorite ways to get out of a reading slump, or if I just like don't really know what to pick up next, I'm like, well, I might as well revisit a favorite. So loved this. 5 stars. It's always probably gonna be 5 stars. After that, I read Give Me Butterflies by Jillian Meadows. This cover is so cute. It's what immediately drew me into it when I saw it on NetGalley. I read this one also as an e-arc. I gave this one 5 stars. I love it. I am trying to get everyone in my life to read this book because it's just so good. As of right now, I think this is my favorite book that I've read this year. This one is a romance between Millie and Finn. Millie is a sunshiny entomologist, which is a like bug scientist, and Finn is a grumpy astronomer. They both work at the same like science museum together. It's a little bit of enemies to lovers in the beginning because they kind of get off on the wrong foot. Millie is really working hard to become the new director of the entomology department. That's kind of putting a lot of pressure on her, and Finn is on the board for like her interviews and stuff, so she thinks that he hates her. They're not getting along, so she's kind of like stressed out about that, maybe like impacting her chances of getting her job. At the museum where they work at, they're doing this little program where kids can come and spend a couple of days out of the week and learn about different scientific things. They go around to each of the departments and learn something new. And on the first day of this, Millie finds out that Finn is the legal guardian for 2 of his nieces. So there's like a single guardian trope, which I think is becoming one of my new favorite tropes, like single parent, single guardian. There's also some more emotional things with this book. Millie has, I think, recently gotten out of an emotionally abusive relationship, so that comes up in the book quite a bit. But I just loved these characters. I felt like they had so much depth to them. I loved hearing about their jobs in STEM. I loved seeing Millie and Finn and the 2 girls all hang out and spend time together. I also really loved Millie's friend group. The found family vibes were so good, and I just loved all of the support that they all had for each other. I also really loved seeing Millie's family. Throughout the book, there are text messages from her family group chat, and those were really fun and funny and just a cute addition. There's also a lot of emotional things going on with Finn and his life. There's a lot of grief and just hard topics in this book, so I definitely would recommend looking at the trigger warnings. On one of the first pages, it does have a list of warnings, so if you want to read those, I'll put that right here. In my review, I said that I loved that it had good communication, lovable side characters, mental health representation, inside jokes, and good steamy scenes. It did also have some baking elements in it, which is always one of my favorite things in books. My only like little ick with this book is that he has a nickname for her that I don't really like, but I'm also just judgmental of nicknames in books in general. But like really in the grand scheme of things, it's a perfect book in my eyes. I loved it so much. It's such a warm, cozy hug of a book, and I just really cannot recommend this more. After that, I read read The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. I gave this one 3 stars, but honestly, I don't remember hardly anything from this book. I would maybe bump it down to like a 2.5 or 2 stars. All I remember about it is this traveling fortune teller. She travels from town to town selling her fortunes, and I think that she ends up collecting like a group of friends that are traveling with her. I think they're looking for someone's daughter or something. I remember it still being cute, and I feel like it should have been my perfect book because it's kind of like cozy fantasy found family vibes, but it just for some reason didn't work for me. It also just might have been like the time that I was reading it maybe. On Goodreads I said that it felt too long and it didn't have great pacing. I'm just really sad that I didn't like this more. I was really excited to read it. The cover's also so pretty. Maybe just don't listen to my opinion on this one and just pick it up for yourself and see, because I really think that it might have just been like my headspace at the time or something, like who knows. After that I have some books that I read for Winterween. I have a vlog for Winterween if you want to watch it. I'll put it in the cards and in the description. But my first book that I read for that was A House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Malerman. This one is about 2 teens that sneak out onto this private lake and they find a house at the bottom of the lake that is just really weird. It's fully intact and the things inside of the house aren't really like behaving like things that are submerged underwater should be behaving, like floating or not floating, like just kind of weird, eerie, supernatural stuff. Also, the house kind of seems to be like calling to them a little bit and making them want to go and explore it. I gave it 2 stars. I really did not like it. I knew before I went into this one that it was probably going to be polarizing. In my review I said this was not it. Maybe I'm just too dumb for this one, but it wasn't scary and I hated the characters. I think it would have been 3 stars if it was following adults instead of teens. Most of the book just made me feel uncomfortable. After that I read We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kleiwer. I guess this one is going to be turned into a movie soon and I'm really excited for it. This one is about Charlie and Eve, who are a young queer couple that flip houses. They just barely bought this house that they're flipping, and one night during the renovations this guy and his family knock on the door and he says, "Hey, I used to live here. Can I show my family the house?" Eve is a little bit of a people pleaser, and so she lets him and his family in, and they can't really take the hint of when it's time to leave. It says, as soon as the strangers enter the home, uncanny things start to happen, including the family's youngest child going missing and a ghostly presence materializing in the basement. Charlie vanishes and Eve slowly loses her grip on reality. I think that's all I want to tell you about it for now. If you want to know a little bit more in depth, you can go check out my Winterween vlog. This was totally like my type of horror. I love movies and TV shows that have this kind of a vibe. Just the way that it was all executed was so perfect. If I didn't already say, I gave it 5 stars. This one is honestly almost neck and neck with Give Me Butterflies for my favorite of the year so far. If you like horror and mixed media and books, you definitely need to pick this one up. After that, I think also for Winterween, I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I gave this one 2.5 stars. This one is about a summer camp that's owned by this like really rich and prestigious family. They send their 13-year-old daughter to go to summer camp there and she vanishes. But this isn't the first time that one of their kids has vanished from the summer camp. Their son went missing from the camp 14 years earlier. So this one just follows the mystery of them trying to find out what happened to these 2 missing kids. There's lots of secrets and lies. I also want to say that it has multiple timelines that you are following. For this one I said I really enjoyed the setting and the writing style, but overall this one was way too long and had too many characters to keep track of. I was hoping for more thriller vibes, but this was definitely more of a literary fiction mystery. It also could have taken place at any time in history and been the same story, other than the lack of cell phones, which was disappointing. I was satisfied with the ending though and can understand why people like it. After that I did another reread. I read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I want to say that I listened to the graphic audio for this one as well. I reread this one in anticipation for Onyx Storm, which I will talk about in a little bit. I think I've read this 3 times now, and I think I'm just gonna stick with my rating that I gave it the first time. I gave it 4 stars, which I know is a little bit polarizing. There's some people that love this series and this book, and there's some people who just like despise it. But I really enjoyed it. I love the characters and the world. The stakes feel high, so it was just fun to revisit this book and these characters. After that I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's about this guy who wakes up on a spaceship and he has basically no memories, like not even his name, who he is, why he's there, and so you just follow him as he slowly starts to like figure out what's going on. And I feel like I don't want to say anything else because I went into this one without really knowing anything other than it was set in space, and it was so fun to just be surprised. In my review I said I really enjoyed this. It went in a direction that I wasn't expecting and I loved it. My only complaints are that it felt really long / could have been shorter, and there was a little bit too much science talk at times in my opinion. I kept zoning out on accident while listening to the audiobook because of it. I do highly recommend the audiobook for this one though. It's so well well done, and I feel like it really enhances the reading experience. I just had a lot of fun with this one. The stakes felt really high once you kind of find out what's happening. There were so many like cute moments. That feels kind of weird to say. And I honestly like kind of teared up a couple times while reading this one. This is a really hyped book, and I totally think that it's appropriately hyped. I think that you should read this one if you haven't already. After that, I read A Lesson in Thorns by Sierra Simone. I gave this one 2 stars. This one is supposed to be like a dark academia story about these people returning to this like house, estate, manor kind of place that they all spent a lot of time at as children, and they were supposed to like uncover some kind of like mystery or something, and it was supposed to be like steamy and like everybody sleeps with each other. I wasted an Audible credit on this one and I'm so mad about it. I thought this was going to be sexy dark academia polyamory, but it was just cringe young adults and a boring mystery. Also, the names of the people in this book, it was trying so hard. They were so bad. The only reason it's not rated lower is because I enjoyed the first few chapters and the writing style. It was very descriptive and flowery, and I also really liked the queer rep. I don't recommend it though. After that, I read a graphic novel called Raised by Ghosts by Brianna Lowenson. I gave this one 3 stars. I got this one as an arc on NetGalley. I said this was good. I enjoyed the art style, the relatability, and the nostalgia. It was a bittersweet story about a girl with a tough home life being saved by writing notes to her friends and drawing. As a creative person, I really enjoyed that aspect. I was having a hard time with the pacing up until the halfway point. It stretched out for a little too long, and I really wish that the last bit, where the art style gets more whimsical and the story gets more uplifting, lasted a little bit longer. I feel like my reviews are starting to sound really repetitive because I just keep saying that all of the books are too long. So apparently that's something that I'm having an issue with this year so far. After that, I read Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I gave this one 3 stars. In my review, I said this was just fine and I'm so sad about it. I reread Iron Flame the week before this came out and was still really confused about who people were. I swear there were characters mentioned that I had never heard of that were just written in like they've been there all along. The first half was so slow and repetitive. Overall, it felt like a recycled Iron Flame where nothing happened. On the bright side though, there were a couple of shocking moments, and as always, I loved the dragons and these characters. And I'll probably still continue in the series when the next one comes out. I think this one is supposed to be like a 5 or 6 book series though, and I just like really don't know how she's gonna drag out the story for that long. I really think that it could have just been a trilogy and it could have been left at that. I know that the series makes way too much money for them to just like stop at 3 books, which is really sad that like capitalism and stuff is potentially ruining like a really good series by stretching it out too long, but what are we gonna do about it? After that, I read Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This one is a slow burn friends to lovers surprise pregnancy book. The main character Eve finds out that she's pregnant after having a one-night stand with this guy. Eve's best friends are Willa and Willa's brother Shep, and they really step in to kind of like help her figure out what her plan is for this pregnancy. I just really loved the found family vibes. This one is about Julian and Dahlia. They are childhood rivals. Dahlia is an interior designer that is returning home after a failed engagement, and Julian is a billionaire, and they're going to work together to flip one of his properties and split the profits. So they're calling a temporary truce to work together, but of course they're gonna have a romance. I honestly didn't remember a single thing about this book. I had to look at the synopsis. I said this was cute but just too long. It definitely could have been at least 100 pages shorter and still been the same book. It also just had a little bit too much going on. I did like the chemistry between Julian and Dahlia though, and I can't remember it, but apparently I really liked the only one bed scene that happened. So again, it's me saying that like the book was too long, but in this case, I definitely remember it being way too long. This is just like a regular contemporary romance book, and it was over 500 pages. Like that's way too long. Like that's a fantasy book, okay? Like there's no reason that a romance book should be over 350 to 400 pages. You know what I'm saying? Like it was just a little bit too much. After that, I read The Collected Regrets of Clover by Mickey Bromer. I gave this one 4 stars. This one is about a death doula living in New York City. This was my first time learning about death doulas. I'd never even heard of that. So these are people that are there to support you during the end of your life, to give you comfort and support, especially if you don't have that from friends or family around you. I said this was such a sweet emotional book about grief and living a full life. I loved the New York City setting and seeing Clover's character development. I also really liked the small romance plot and how the book ended. I go more in depth on this book and the previous 2 books in my Reading Like Gwen vlog, so if you want more like in-depth thoughts on those books and this one, you can go check that video out. After a really heavy book like that, I just wanted something like fun. So I read Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. I gave this one 4 stars. This is I think you could consider it like a dark romance. It's about this woman who I think is like an ER nurse or something, and she's really into this one guy on social media that does thirst traps while wearing a mask. He's like a hacker coding kind of guy, and he finds out that she is really into him, and so he starts to stalk her and they have a relationship. I said this wasn't a literary masterpiece or anything, and some aspects of it were a little bit cringe, but it was so fun, dark, and steamy that I don't even care. If you're a fan of Butcher and Blackbird, you definitely need to read this one. I would also recommend listening to the audiobook. After that one, I did another reread of a favorite book. I read The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. I read this one for the first time a couple of years ago, and I want to continue in the series, so I felt like I needed to kind of like read it again just to remember what happened. This time around, I listened to the audiobook, and I really liked the audiobook. The first chapter of this is so intense and just like hooks you right away. The setting of this book was so vivid in my mind. It's a really interesting concept. If I'm remembering and visualizing it right, there are these island kingdoms that are all connected by this giant bridge, and whoever controls the bridge has all of the power basically, because they can control the imports and exports and who gets things and who doesn't. So in this book, we're following the main character, Laura, who is a warrior princess trained in isolation. She's the daughter of the king, who is not in charge of the bridge. It says Laura is driven by 2 certainties. The first is that King Aaron of the Bridge Kingdom is her enemy, and the second is that she'll be the one to bring him to his knees. She is given as a bride to Aaron, who's the king of the Bridge Kingdom, but she's being sent in by her father to be like a warrior spy and to find out how to take him and his kingdom down. It is so good. The enemies to lovers, the forced proximity, the secrets, and the spying. It's also pretty steamy. If you love Throne of Glass, ACOTAR, Fourth Wing, From Blood and Ash, you need to read this series because it's on par with those, if not better than some of them. And that's just the first book. I haven't even like finished the series yet. I just highly recommend it. After that, I read The No Show by Beth O'Leary. I read this for the X's and O's readathon, which I also have a vlog for if you want to go check that out. This one is marketed as a rom-com about 3 women who all get stood up by the same guy on Valentine's Day. Going in, I thought it was going to be a very like John Tucker Must Die kind of situation, but that's not what it was at all. I can't really say too much more than that because I could spoil it pretty easily. I gave this one 2 stars. For my review, I said the premise of this one was fun, but I think that it was misleading, especially with the cover. I was really mad after kind of finding out the direction that the story was going in. I also had an issue with the pacing and was getting bored around the 50% mark. I will say that each of the women that we followed had unique personalities, and I could tell which perspective I was reading from. It also takes talent to pull off a book as complex as this one, so kudos to the author for that. This wasn't a bad book by any means, but it just wasn't for me. I would definitely read something else from this author though. After that, I read The Traitor Queen by Danielle L. Jensen, the second book in the Bridge Kingdom series. This one just follows the events of the first book. I didn't write anything in my review, and I don't really remember a whole lot of what happened in this one. I gave it 3.5 stars, so I liked it. It wasn't as good as the first book. I still stand by that I love this series, and I'm really excited to continue in it. Next, I read Something Wild and Wonderful by Anita Kelly. This one is a really sweet queer romance between Ben and Alexi. For different reasons, they're both hiking this trail called the Pacific Coast Trail. It's one that takes months to complete. They end up meeting up while they're walking the trail, and they end up kind of sticking together, and they end up having a romance. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I loved it, and I knew that I was going to love it before going in because I've heard just like nothing but good things about it. It was such a sweet story with awesome communication and character development. I also really loved that we got to actually know the characters, or get to know them at the same time that they were getting to know each other, instead of just being told by the author that they were getting to know each other. We actually got to like experience those conversations and those meaningful moments with them together. I also really related to Alexi's character. I don't know why, but it just like wasn't quite a 5-star, but I still loved it and highly recommend it. After that, I read Scythe and Sparrow by Brynne Weaver. It's the third book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. There are 3 brothers in this series, so we're just following the third brother. The brother in this one is a small town doctor, and he ends up helping this woman who is injured. She works at the circus, but she ends up staying with him while she's recovering. I liked this one. It wasn't my favorite in the series. Butcher and Blackbird is still my favorite one. I gave this one 3 stars, and I just have to say that the cotton candy scene was not it. Like, I'm sorry if you were into that, but that is just like so unsanitary and yucky. Like, it was just not it for me. After that, I read Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This one is about two rival video game companies that are going to have to work together on the same project. So to try and get everyone comfortable and familiar enough to like work together, they decide to go on this like company getaway and stay in this cabin and try to get both of the teams to get along with each other. So it's kind of like enemies to lovers. I didn't know before picking this one up that it was a short story, and I need more of this book. I had so much fun with it. I gave it 4 stars. It was so cute and steamy, and I just need the rest of it as a full-length novel. Like I said, the enemies to lovers aspect was really fun, and I also loved all of the video game references and like the talk of gaming and how you develop games. That aspect of it kind of reminded me of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow a little bit, but I feel like that's something that I might need to like explore more in books, is like video game aspects, because I love video games. My husband loves video games. This one is about 2 college students that are both part of like the swimming program. One of them is a diver and one of them I think is just a swimmer. I don't remember for sure, but it's a sports romance, and they start a relationship with each other. A lot of it is kind of about them exploring like BDSM together. So this one's definitely steamier, so if you're not into that, maybe skip this one. I gave this one 4 stars and it was a really fun time. Next, I read First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. I was so excited for this one because I loved the Love Light Farm series by her. Unfortunately though, this one was just like a 3.5. It was just okay. It's about this guy named Aiden Valentine who is the host of a romance radio show. He has kind of fallen out of love with love though. It says, but when a young girl calls into the station asking for dating advice for her mom, the interview goes viral, thrusting Aiden and his Heartstrings radio show into the limelight. Lucy, the female main character, gets kind of like roped up into the radio show because of her daughter and ends up spending a lot of time with Aiden, and she ends up kind of like co-hosting the show with him a little bit. They're kind of trying to do like a dating show for her, kind of like Bachelorette style. I said this was cute, but it was missing something for me. I was also so sick of them having great communication and then suddenly one of them taking 5 steps back. I did really like the radio show aspect and the family dynamic that Lucy had. I still love this author and will continue to pick up her books, but this one was just a step above okay for me. After that, I read another poetry collection. This one is called Make Believe by Victoria Hutchins. The cover says it's poems for hoping again. I gave this one 3 stars. I enjoyed this collection and I think that it will be perfect for those who are just getting into poetry. I liked the themes and that I could understand and relate to most of it. There are quite a few poems that I really liked, but a lot of it was just okay and not very memorable. I think that it could have been shortened and still gotten its point across. I think I'm just kind of a fan of smaller poetry collections. When they end up being really long, I just kind of feel like the themes start to get really repetitive. My favorite poems from this collection were Welcome to the World, Come Out Wherever You Are, Birthday Cake Recipe, Feeds None, Shapeshifter, What Peace Weighs, Let Her Eat Cake, Reasons to Stick Around for a While, That's Cringe, Object Permanence, Things I Don't Say to Strangers I Used to Know, For the One You Don't Know How to Help, Playing God, What Heaven Smells Like, and Don't Save Joy for Last. I also really enjoyed the passage, Open the Door When Pain Knocks, but leave the porch light on for joy. And also the passage, We Forget, From Outside the Cocoon It Looks Like Nothing is Happening. After that, I read The Kiss Countdown by Etta Easton. This one is about a struggling event planner and an astronaut, and they end up fake dating each other. There's also a little bit of like a forced proximity trope in this one. I gave this one 3 stars. I said this was really cute. I loved reading about each of the main characters' jobs and seeing what cute dates they went on. The fake dating was fun, but was eventually frustrating because it was getting in the way of the romance. This was a sexy, fun time, but I don't know how memorable it will be. I think that one of my main problems that I have with fake dating books is that in a situation like theirs where they're both single, they're both attracted to each other, whenever they're like in a situation where they need to make people believe that they are dating each other, that they like each other, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't hold his hand, and like they start like getting in their heads about it, and like they're not letting themselves actually just like act like they're dating each other. I feel like any person that was in that situation would just like kind of take advantage of it. Like you might as well have fun. So I don't know, that was kind of bugging me in this one. They just like wouldn't let themselves just like actually fake date, you know? I think the second book in the series just came out, and I am planning on reading that one though. And I do think that that one also has some kind of like astronaut kind of vibes to it. And then the last book that I read in February was a really nostalgic one for me. It's The Trouble with Tink by Kiki Thorpe. It's the first book in the Tales of Pixie Hollow series. This was a series that I read when I was a kid, and I was going to do a fairy books round 2 vlog. I did a video a couple of years ago reading fairy books, and I had a really fun time with it. So I was going to read the first like 5 books in the Pixie Hollow series, along with a couple of other like adult fairy books that were on my TBR, but the video just like didn't really end up working out, so I only read the first book in the Pixie Hollow series. But it was really fun and nostalgic to revisit something that I loved as a kid. I also just love fairies. I didn't rate it because I just don't really feel like I want to rate it. It's not made for my age group, and it was just something kind of fun and silly to read. But I just highly recommend reading books from your childhood because it's really fun. So those are all of the books that I've read over the last couple of months. These 2 are definitely my favorite. I am obsessed with these and I can't stop thinking about them. I also forgot to say that I read this one twice actually. I read it in January before it came out because I read it as an ARC, and then I read it in February on audio after it came out, and I loved it just as much the second time. And I also really liked the audiobook, so I would recommend that. But yeah, loved these, highly recommend them. Let me know in the comments if you read any of the same books as me, or if you participated in any of the same readathons that I did. If you made it to the end of the video, leave a butterfly emoji in the comments for Give Me Butterflies. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Appalachian sunrise.